If you can make yourself more valuable to your organization, you'll be seen and have a path for growth. Whether you're male, female, it doesn't really matter. Be bigger than your current position.
Most entrepreneurs don't start their businesses until much later in their careers, when they have the experience, the network, the execution to turn their ideas into reality. And that's just one of the things that Patti Nowak is here to talk about on today's show. Patti is the owner of Control+M Solutions. And yes, we're going to get into mid-career entrepreneurship, but she'll also take us through her actionable advice when it comes to mentorship and empowering women in the field of manufacturing. The only appropriate way to start, Patti, is a cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Back at you, Chris.
And we're hanging out on your home turf. We're not too far from Lake Michigan, but we're a little further north from where I live. Describe where we are in Sheboygan, Wisconsin at Three Sheeps Brewing.
Well, first of all, you're at the greatest brewery in Sheboygan, probably in a bigger area than Sheboygan, but Sheboygan is about 50 miles north of Milwaukee. It's along the lake between Milwaukee and Green Bay. I live in Kohler, which is just on the other side of the highway, the land of, obviously, the famous Kohler Company.
Mm-hmm.
It is a beautiful area. There's gorgeous beaches here. There's lots of places to stay, home of world-class golf, great accommodations, a beautiful spa. It's a wonderful, gracious place to live.
Yeah, no, it's. I was glad to have an excuse to come up here because Three Sheeps is an iconic Wisconsin brewery. I should say it's become iconic in recent years, and just a good excuse to get up here on a nice summer day. People can't see it right now, but the garage doors here across the brewery are all open, so the breeze is coming in. This is the ideal way to podcast. So, with Manufacturing Happy Hour, we like to get to know our guests before we dive into some of the meat of the conversation and what you're doing at Control+M. My first question is just trying to understand what the common thread across your career is, because you run businesses, you've worked in IT, information systems, cloud implementations. What has been the common theme of your career, if there is one?
Well, interestingly enough, I started my career as a cost accountant for Oshkosh B'gosh back in the 90s. And if you think about it, when I was a little girl, my dad had a spare UNIVAC mainframe in our home. And he used to run a side business for skeet shooting, bowling, and archery competitions. So he taught me how to program and how to do data entry very early on. You know, as a kid, making a little extra pin money, right? And it made computers very not scary to me. And I've always had a natural penchant for business. I've loved accounting. And I discovered that when I was in accounting, I could easily translate technology to business people language, right? So I could say to them, okay, the IT people are saying this, and this is what you need to do from a business perspective, which is a natural role for like a BA. But I didn't really have the education to be a BA. I really rather enjoyed the accounting work. And eventually had the opportunity to get into networking, which helped me break into IT. Accounting is great, but as the world's second oldest profession, it's a little hard for females to get ahead sometimes in accounting, or at least it was back in the 90s. But IT was a pretty new field, so it was easy for me to get ahead. And I had the opportunity to, be building PCs with, circuit boards and putting them, swapping boards out, adding memory, doing all those fun things myself. And I grew from there into software. And that's really where I kind of feel like my career bloomed, because I could see what software could do for a company. So I sort of turned that into a niche, working with one specific software and helping companies become more successful. So if you had asked me like what the common thread is, I would say it would be understanding that IT is a tool. It's no different than a hammer for a carpenter. And when used appropriately, it can really make your business do well. When used inappropriately, it can cause you all sorts of anxiety and an awful lot of money, open you to risk. So
yeah, and I might even add, I feel like the way you described it was IT as a communication tool, and you've always been a communicator throughout your career, right? You were saying it's almost like you were using accounting as a language between different departments back in the day. I appreciate you taking us through that and discussing how, I like thinking about software as the new communication tool. We're going to get into that more in a bit, but one of the things is you have an entrepreneurial side to yourself as well. I'd be very curious to understand what advice you might have for managing multiple companies, because not everyone out there listening to this, I would say, is in the entrepreneurial realm, but they're all probably trying to balance a number of things and wear a lot of different hats in their manufacturing roles.
Well, for me, starting my own business was a happy accident. So I ended up without a job at one point in my life. And I thought, well, gosh, I really know this software very well. I'm going to hang up my shingle and see what happens. And I got my first customer within 5 minutes of sending out an email saying I was starting my own company, which was incredible. I had 3 customers within a week and about $150,000 contract signed within a month. So a lot of that came from the work that I had done for the previous 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So people say to me, how do I start my business? I said, you start it 10 years before you want to open it.
Yeah.
So I had discovered the power of Plex, which is an ERP system owned by
Mm-hmm.
Rockwell Automation.
Yep.
And it's the ERP system that I was working with. And I really dove into it, had a propensity for it, and started doing some outreach things like user groups and community education. I also worked on an MBA because I felt it was important for me to understand all aspects of business. If I was going to help people with technology, I needed to understand business. So that really helped. I went and got a project management certification. Being a professional project manager, a PMP certification is a key requirement for me to be able to execute projects. So if you take my accounting background, the PMP, the MBA, the depth in Plex, I developed all that before I started my own business. So I had this great basis. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a very natural step for me. If you're going to start without that, you're going to need a lot of that information to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Then to spin up another business, for example, we spun up a second business in the ULC up in Canada and hired Canadian people because Canadian folks like to work with Canadian folks. This is a different country and they want to feel comfortable. So then I started learning about international business, and I did that with a number of mentors in my life, people
Mm-hmm.
who gave me great business advice. The key to being a successful entrepreneur and running more than one company is knowing who to ask the questions from. People who own their own companies can sometimes give the impression that they've got it all together and they know everything, but what they really have is a strong network of people, to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I have 2 CPAs that work for Control+M. They don't do our accounting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because my accountant started when it was just me, right? So she knows Patti. She knows Control+M LLC only. She also knows Control+M ULC. And she also knows Peach Nut Productions, which is the company that runs our annual user conference, Plexapalooza.
Oh, okay.
So, and they're all different entities for different reasons. So even the idea of knowing that I had to have 3 companies, you have to think about that. And I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
It was insurance regulations. Insurance for a user conference is different than errors and omissions insurance for an LLC.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Collections is different, right? If one of my clients forgets to pay a bill with one company or a bill falls behind, I don't want to say you can't partake in the other company. I'm sorry, you can't come to Plexapalooza because your AP department forgot to send us a check for an invoice 4 months. It just feels really punitive.
Yeah.
So separating them made things a lot more simple.
So I'm catching a couple things here. One, the thing you just highlighted, there's some, let's call it logistics to it, legalities. There's some things that necessitate having the 3 separate businesses, all of which, as I'm hearing, they're all interrelated in
Yes.
a lot of ways, but it makes sense to have them separated. But I think you gave some really good, just general career advice as well. When you started your business, you had the foundation of project management, MBA, accounting, decades of experience. And also, I like the user group and education side of it because I think the community side of everything is pretty underrated. I think when folks hear that someone started a business and then within, a few days had some clients, within a month had the first paycheck, I feel like there's this overnight success myth that goes across their mind. But one thing I would ask then, and I guess it kind of goes back to where we started, right? We talked about the common thread across your career. I feel like there's also the myth of people starting companies when they're like in their 20s, right? We see those success stories, we glorify them. But, you were very intentional about your career. You saw the common threads throughout them. So I guess where I'm going is if some people think it's like, oh, if I'm going to start a business, I kind of need to know what I'm going to do for my business. Would you say in your case, it just kind of built over time where you're like, oh, I have something here? And if so, was there a moment where was it when you were making those initial calls? Like, what was the moment where you're like, I can be a business owner?
Well, it's sort of funny. But we were at a really like a tough point in our family. We were going through some very difficult things, and I lost my job, and I was like pretty down. I was pretty bummed, and 50 years old, or almost 50 years old, and thinking, "Holy cow! What am I going to do now?" I was actually a little bit worried, and my former boss actually suggested to me, "Hey, why don't you give us a try?" And I had a nice severance agreement. I mean, I didn't need money to get by, but I'm somewhat antsy. I have a hard time sitting still. And I thought, okay, I called the software company and said, hey, would you give me a job? And they said, yeah, we can, but not for a couple of months. And I thought, well, what am I going to do for a couple of months? I understand budgets. Well, let's see what happens. I had there was a safety net. I had the world's greatest safety net.
Mm-hmm.
So at 50 years old, forging a new career was a little bit easier for me because I had a nice safety net.
Yeah.
I think it's easier when you're older for a couple reasons. Number one, when you're younger, you've got so many other things dividing your attention. So the basics, like, gosh, I want to find someone to spend the rest of my life with. I want to finish my education. I want to pay off my student loans. I didn't have to worry about that at all. I'm married to a great guy, own my home. My kids are grown up and out of the house. I'm not schlepping kids to kindergarten. I'm not changing their diapers. I'm an empty nester.
Yeah.
So I have very few, I don't want to say few responsibilities, but it was okay if I had to take a 1-week trip somewhere. My husband's going to get fine. He's going to get along fine without me, right? Or if I need to work 12, 14, 16 hours in a day, he knows how to make a sandwich. If you've got a family with young kids, you don't have that freedom, right? Or maybe when you're younger and you're running around in your Ferrari body, you want to go out and go learn how to go surfing or go running, right? When you get a little bit older, you have a little bit more time.
Yeah.
So if you're young right now and you're thinking about starting a business, keep thinking about it. Say, hey, look, what are the things I might need 10 years from now that'll make me successful? Because the most important thing, especially if you have children, the most important thing is making sure those children know that you're there, right? I was never one to sacrifice my family for business. And sometimes I probably ticked off both sides, but you know what? That's life. That's life with every parent now, right? When I was younger, it was more moms taking care of kids. Now, co-parenting is much more frequent. And I've seen people make joint decisions much more effectively than when I was younger.
Yeah.
Back then, it was just me.
Well, what I heard there was you were also we talked about the foundation of what the experiences that led you to successfully build a business, but also there's that life foundation as well, where, yes, when someone's young and out of college, maybe they don't have kids at that point, right? They probably have some location flexibility. But, when you've kind of checked off a lot of those life experiences and you've got that life foundation under your belt, I just appreciate the very concrete example you shared about entrepreneurship later in life in that scenario.
There's always time.
Yeah. One other thing you mentioned in the conversation was around how you're working with just one software, right?
Yep.
Your business is solely focused on Plex. And I'm very curious, a lot of other manufacturers out there, often small to mid-sized manufacturers, might have, 2 or 3 or 4 big clients that represent like 80% of their business. So as someone that's also essentially serving one primary client or, one primary partner serving many clients, what is your advice to manufacturers to de-risk in that scenario or make sure like they're covering their bases?
That was probably the hardest thing that I ever had to do. So at one point we did have a customer who was probably 75% of our sales.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty standard business rule that if any one customer has that big of a chunk of your sales, you're at high risk, right? And we were growing at a nice rate, just a little bit. And I sat down and I thought, you know what? I got to get rid of this customer. And when I first mentioned it to my husband, he thought I was crazy. And I said, but if something happens, if I don't exit them, if they exit me, we're going to be in trouble. So we started working together, and it turns out that it was a very good time for a mutual breakup. They were going to be moving into a different direction, just coincidentally, and I couldn't believe it The minute we started doing less with that one company that consumed so many of my resources, we started an explosive growth pattern. We went from 5 employees to a dozen employees in I think 2.5 years. It was crazy growth because we were so focused on doing everything to keep that one company happy that we were not out looking for more business.
Mm.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier the importance about community. When you are in consulting, the best way to get ahead is to be known. So we do a lot of outreach things like the user conference I mentioned, Plexapalooza. Like we have a YouTube channel, which honestly, when we first started doing this, I thought was the most ridiculous idea ever. I thought,
Yeah.
who's gonna watch us on YouTube? But what happened was COVID hit, and I started getting calls from presidents of companies saying, "Oh my gosh, we're in an essential industry. I need to ramp up. I'm running one shift. I need to run three. I'm running three shifts. I need to shut down 3 days a week. And how do I rapidly expand or contract my workforce?" And after I built the third one, I started feeling icky about that. Like, oh my gosh, this is a worldwide pandemic. We don't know, like the world could end tomorrow. And you're charging people? It felt icky. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a webinar and say, okay, look, if you use Plex and if you need to expand or contract, here are the things that you need to take into consideration. And here are the things that you need to do. And I reversed the charges for the 3 clients that I had built because I thought, okay, it's time for me to pump some goodness into the universe and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And my business ops manager said, you should start a YouTube channel. And I said, you are crazy. No one's going to listen to it.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I think you just don't really understand, And so I said, fine, you don't have that much to do right now because it's COVID. I told my staff, every 2 weeks, we're going to put on a webinar. You pick the topic. It's something you're comfortable in and you're passionate about. But while we're in this potential downtime, I want you to practice your presentation skills, your configuration skills, and do a webinar. I don't care what the subject is. And we started building a following and building a YouTube channel. So now we have over 80 free videos that we know salespeople use, that we know our competitors use, that we know our customers and people who use Plex who are not our customers use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I learned a long time ago in my 30s that you can never really give anything away, that anything you give to the community, it will give back to you. And I believe that's why we've been so successful. It's how we're well known. We don't market.
Mm-hmm.
We just do a really good job. We do the best job there is. We charge a fair price.
Mm-hmm.
We no charge. I always tell my employees, hey, look, you were a customer once. Would you be happy getting a bill for that? If you wouldn't, I'm going to authorize you to no charge it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel nickel dimed. I don't care if you're at the grocery store or in a consulting firm.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel that way. So just bringing good things to the table, I think is what really mattered. And that kind of came from, the COVID, the YouTube. It's learning these new opportunities for business streams, right?
Yeah, and I want to get into that philosophy you just mentioned and how you're empowering your employees to, like in those no charge scenarios, right? We're going to get to that probably towards the end of this conversation.
Sure.
You brought up a couple things that I'm going to keep re-referencing here. And one of the comments you made earlier was you went into IT or one of the reasons you went into IT is accounting's an older field, and you felt as a woman in industry, getting into a new space would give you a chance to excel further ahead. And just in our conversations, even before this interview, I know empowering women in industry has been a big focus of yours. When did mentoring become a more formal or informal part of what you've been doing in this industry, specifically for women in this space?
I had to get past some internal feelings in order to be a successful mentor, right? A lot of women worry about what's called imposter syndrome. So they're in a position that they feel that they don't deserve to be in. They second guess themselves. I probably was no different in that I thought, okay, who'd want to come to me to be mentored? I'm not that successful in my career yet. So why would anyone come to me? Number one. Number two, I used to get invited to women's groups and think, okay, it feels balls to be here, because if there was a men's only group, women would have an uproar. So why do we need a women's only group? We say we want equality, but then we treat ourselves as special. We treat each other as special. And I really struggled with that. But finally, what I ended up recognizing after beginning to support events is that younger women really need to see older women in a successful position so that they know that that route exists. When I was, in my early 20s working in manufacturing, I couldn't help but notice looking around the offices. All the offices were on the outside and they were all filled with men.
Mm-hmm.
There was one woman at that company that had that position. And every now and then she would take us aside and say, hey, look, these are the things that I'm seeing you exhibit that I think if you need to stop them to get ahead. And then I'd go back to my office and I'd hear, the guys talking about, well, we're going to go play basketball this afternoon. And there was a lot of business that took place in the racquetball court.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I wasn't involved in that, I didn't get the inside scoop.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I saw these barriers and I couldn't figure out how to get around them in that accounting world. But in the IT world, I think my personality fit a little bit better. My business knowledge made me stand out a little bit more. And I had a wonderful mentor who helped me grow there. And it was interesting. I found out I ended up connecting with a lady about 5 years ago. So this is 20 some years later, right? And turns out we shared the same mentor, and we are basically the best of friends now. That when I quit that company, he stopped mentoring me and started mentoring her. So he was really a great champion for women's advocates. So once I realized that people are looking for it, and if you tell a story people relate to, they come back and say, I told my daughter that story. One of my favorites was I started at an electronics company in my mid-30s. Mm-hmm. The same week as another guy started co-managing IT with me. I was managing hardware. He was managing software.
Okay.
We're both the same age, both had the same education, both had the same experience, and we started at the same time. Loved working with him. Great guy. One day, my boss came to me and said, I need you to do a project. And that project involved exposing me to everyone's salary within the company.
Okay.
And I found out that Jeff made $10,000 a year more than me. Now, at the time, I was a single mom in my 30s. That was a lot of money. So I did the project start to finish and gave my boss the results. And then I said, hey, I need to talk to you about something, Dave. I don't understand something. Jeff and I have the same experience, same education, started at the same time, but he makes $10,000 more than me. Now, your wife is a professional, so I know it's not because I'm a woman. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm going to need a $10,000 raise today. And he said, give me an hour. So I walked out of his office and I was nervous. It was like there was a herd of buffaloes or butterflies in my stomach, right? And he called me back in an hour later and he said, Patty, I've been thinking about what you said and I agree. I'm going to give you a $5,000 raise. And I said, gosh, Dave, thanks. That's a great place to start, but I'm going to need all 10. He said, I don't have the authorization to give you a $10,000 raise. And so I said, well, who does? He said, the president. I said, well, let's go see him. I'm sure he doesn't want this inequity. He says, give me an hour. And an hour later, I had a $10,000 raise. And I thought, man, I'm not letting the man keep me down. I'm winner, right? So a couple weeks later, I was talking to my boss in a social situation. I said, having a couple beers. Dave, I just got to ask you, I don't get it. Like, why did you give him more money than me? You know I'm qualified. And he said, here's the deal. I offered you both the same amount of money when I hired you. Jeff said, I won't take it. I need another 10 grand. Yeah. You didn't know your worth. You didn't ask for it. That's why you didn't get it. And I thought, oh my gosh. And he said, I bet you'll never make that mistake again. So he taught me a really great lesson. And I'd never told anybody that story before, but one day I was sitting with my friend Jean, who was extremely successful, and I just casually told her that story. And she said, every woman needs to hear that. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I said, well, I don't think it's all that interesting myself. She said, no. And the first time, she said, it's fascinating. So the first time I told it to a women's group, I still get people coming up to me saying, I told my daughter that story. You empowered me. You gave me the courage. Because I said, look, if you go in fact-based, unemotionally, you will win every time because that's what men do.
Mm.
And so it's been kind of fun learning that I have something to contribute to women, and they have something to contribute to me too, because younger people, especially like the young woman who told me to start my YouTube channel, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
You have to be open to both sides. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So great story. Also, great advice around the salary negotiation aspect. I feel like one thing that I understand you've done pretty well is you've helped women build confidence through non-traditional methods. Can you share like some of those examples, whether it's individuals you've mentored, women you've worked with, etc.? I'd love to keep going on this thread.
So there's been a couple of women that I've really appreciated mentoring in an official sense. You know, you've got multiple different kinds of mentoring, right? There's peer mentoring, there's flash mentoring, there's little, quick things that you can do. There's long-term mentoring, there's official and unofficial methods. Officially, I had been working with a woman who had almost zero confidence in her life. She was very, very good, but she just didn't believe it. So I worked with her on the easy things like confidence, and, those are the easy ones to knock out of the park, right? But sometimes you get into more unusual situations. For example, I went to look at a manufacturing operation that we're doing an operational excellence project at. So I went in with two gentlemen who work for me, came into the leadership team, 3 men, 1 woman, and we went into a conference room. And the woman was a buyer for 5 plants, and she said, "Hey, I just don't have time for this today." So that's fine. I thought it was a little odd that you'd hire 3 consultants to come in at a fairly stout rate, and you don't have time for us. But
Yeah.
okay. So we sat in a conference room, and we're going crazy, putting things on whiteboards, sticky pads, notes, and everything. And I asked something about the buying process. And this woman walked into the conference room. She put her hand up and she whispered into the ear of one of the gentlemen in there, and she walked away. And I thought, oh my gosh, she must have had a family emergency. Something must be bad. And this gentleman said, well, Betsy was just in here and she wants me to tell you that XYZ. And I said, what? He said, yeah, she's sitting in the next room listening to us, and she's feeding me information. And I thought,
It's really odd.
the oddest thing I had ever seen
Yeah.
a woman do. And so I made it my point, when nobody else was looking, to step in her office and say, Betsy, which is obviously not her real name, why don't you feel comfortable with this? And she said, she told me the men that she works with did not make her feel comfortable to join. And I said, well, then let me make you feel comfortable to join. You are a buyer for 5 factories in a $500 million company. You control so much cash flow, more than almost anyone else in this company, if you think about it. Even the plant managers don't have the cash flow that you have. You control profitability. If you think of gross profit and material costs is a huge chunk of it. But you are also not acting like a leader. You don't act like you belong at the table, and that's why you don't feel comfortable at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So come sit at the table with us and be comfortable and be part of the group, and don't feel nervous, because to me, anytime a woman says, I can't get ahead because the men around me won't let me, I remind them of this. Every man that got ahead had to beat out every man ahead of him to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just another runner in the race. That's all you are. Just beat out the people in front of them. I don't care what their sex is. If there's a position you want, go after and get it. Act like you already have it. Dress like you already have it. Work like you already have it. Share your ideas. And if you're in an environment where they're not being accepted, then get out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can't change the machine, find a new machine. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, I like your mix of things you're doing, recognizing that, situations haven't always been, let's say, stacked up fairly or equitably is maybe the right way to describe it. But you're also holding the women you mentor and work with accountable as well, saying, hey, we have women in manufacturing, formal groups like that now, right, that are really helping share these stories and getting that out there. But you're also saying, hey, you got to hold yourself personally accountable and make things happen as well. I think you have a nice balance there.
And sometimes it's nice to have, just have the side conversations like, my gosh, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't care how you slice and dice it. If you're a parent, if you're a spouse, and you're working, there's a lot to balance. So sometimes, trading those secrets is great. I think women might be a little bit better at that,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think that we're more happy to share, right?
Mm.
So I think if people were more willing to learn from other women, right? So if you can set those conditions up, with Rockwell, we work with a group called Women Electrifying Business.
Okay.
And at our Plexapalooza show, we had a really informal meeting that was guided by my party coordinator, Jessica Williams of Whimsical Celebrations. And what she did is she broke the team up into groups of 10, and she worked to get the women to talk together about their professional and personal experiences. And by the end of the night, I think all 30 people who were in that group became good and fast friends, learned about one another. We made networking connections that can help us all grow our careers.
Mm-hmm.
And it all happened in a very comfortable and non-stressful situation.
Mm-hmm.
If we can make those things happen and make people feel comfortable, we'll help women get ahead. And men are always welcome at these events.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with that personally because I feel if a man comes to a woman's event, we have a tendency to preach to him like, hey, you need to give women a chance and you need to stop, I don't like that. I think if a man is coming to a women's event, what I want him to learn is how he can effectively communicate with them,
Mm-hmm.
not to say, hey, you're a naughty boy, you're keeping me down, right? Because
Sure.
I don't see that happening anymore.
Yeah. Do you have an example of ways you've seen men empower women in the industry, right? I think we've been talking about what women can do in this case, and I do want to continue on that path and get maybe a little more tactical advice in that regard. But since we're kind of at this point in the conversation, like, are there examples of where you're seeing men doing a better job creating a more equitable environment in this day and age?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're working with a company, and I just literally heard this story last night, and it blew my
nice.
mind. I was talking to a woman who's running a factory, and they're doing a safety blitz right now, right? So safety is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And she went on the manufacturing floor, and she's working with two people that work with my company. And she said, because it's going to be on the factory floor, I threw on a cap, safety equipment. She is not dressed as an executive, although she is an executive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she said to the quality guy that she was working with, hey, you've broken some safety policies. I need you to, do this and do it this way. And he basically ignored her and just kept on doing the wrong thing. And she continued to, he actually, swore at her, and he said, I'm going to go talk to my boss about you. And she kind of started laughing and said, yeah, go ahead, go, because, his boss works for her.
Yeah.
So she waited just long enough for this young man to walk in his boss's office and rant up a storm. And she very, very ladylike walked in and said, when you're done with him, would you please come to my office? Thank you. Young man was horrified.
Yeah.
And when the manager came to her office, she said to him, I could have fired that man on the spot, but I didn't, because I don't know if he's a good worker for you, a bad worker for you. I don't want to crucify him for this one mistake, but he needs to learn. He needs to learn that respect. I don't care. I don't care if I'm a shipping clerk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if I'm the lady delivering coffee. You don't speak to anyone like that at all. And she had him go send that message. And I thought that was so powerful, the way that she unemotionally dealt with it,
Mm-hmm.
and taught that young man a lesson that he'll probably never forget. And he's candidly lucky that he still has a job, because I'll be honest with you, if someone spoke to me, someone who worked for me
Yeah.
spoke to me that way,
Yeah.
I would be very quick to say, I don't need you.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
So I'll give her the kudos on the maturity for that.
Yeah. I appreciate the scenarios where you can learn a lesson and get a second chance. I know that doesn't always come around, but I do hope that those situations create a powerful lesson, like you said, that they never forget, and ultimately, make them a better citizen, team member, all that moving forward.
Well, I'm generally a better human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Other things I've seen men do is making sure that women have a seat at the table and that women are heard.
Mm-hmm.
Because some women, if they don't have they don't have a big, strong, booming voice, may come up with ideas that maybe are not heard,
Mm-hmm.
or they may shrink at the first sign of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Which my favorite line is, "Hey, aren't we brainstorming here?" because if you think about the rules of brainstorming, there's no such thing as a bad idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, people could argue and say drunk driving is a bad idea, which of course it is. But what if talking about drunk driving led to Uber or Lyft,
Mm-hmm.
right? What if that led to that? So what if something I say that's a bad idea leads to a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
So we remind people of what the rules of brainstorming are to get people to be heard, and remind people too that in the end, all anybody, like if you're in a boardroom, everyone wants attention. If you got a good idea, shout it out. You
Mm-hmm.
have to compete. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with competing.
Yeah. No, I love that tactical advice. One other thing that you mentioned, this was before we were recording, when we were first chatting with one another, you talked about making yourself big, like making yourself valuable. I think that is a good way to kind of wrap this part of the conversation. What advice do you have to women in manufacturing, women in industry, really people in industry in general, for making yourself bigger, more valuable, etc. in that regard? And maybe what you mean by that as well, because I don't know if I'm phrasing it the right way either.
No, I think so. We sort of started this at last year's Plexapalooza because if you think about a software user conference, right? It was a small conference. There were opportunities to learn technically, and then there were opportunities to learn professionally. For example, project management, organizational change management, those things. And what I told everyone in here, you might be an IT person, you might be a purchasing person, you might be a quality person, but I'm going to teach you how to be more to your company.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you come back from this event, you say to your boss, look, I know right now I'm a manufacturing engineer, but guess what I learned? And let me bring that to the table. Bring all these extra bits to the table because people who didn't see you before are going to see you now. You're going to be a bigger influence in your company. You're going to be smarter, and you're going to start that flywheel concept of value going, right? So you go from a great example. Before I started consulting, I looked around me and there was a lot of promotions going on in my company, right? About
Mm-hmm.
6 men got promoted to director. I was in with them. I was in that position. I was in that salary range, and I did not get promoted direct to director. So I went to the president and I said, why? He said, I just don't see you as director level material. And at the time, it really smarted. And I went back to my office and I pouted for a little while. And I thought, okay, what does he see in them that he doesn't see in me? And I realized that the good things I was doing were not visible to him. And I needed to make myself bigger within the organization. So my goal is to say, I don't care what gender you are, I don't care what age you are. If you can make yourself more valuable to your organization, you'll be seen and have a path for growth. Whether you're male, female, it doesn't really matter. Be bigger than your current position. Figure out, look at your own supply chain, right? Who feeds me information and who do I feed information to? Start to learn about both ends of that. Learn about your customers, learn about who you're a customer to. Find out how you can make their lives easier. Because if you really want to get in somebody's good graces, make their life easier. Reduce their work. And then they're going to love you, and then you're going to be considered for more, and you're going to be able to grow. So I'm a big fan of building your own organic growth.
Yeah, no, I love that advice. I'd like to add one more question on this
All
train
right.
of thought. What is it? We've been talking about people. I feel like this has really been geared towards folks in the industry so far, but you've mentioned that we need to get more people into the manufacturing industry. That is no secret to anyone that
Right.
listens to this show. How does everything we're talking about related to inspiring confidence in women, etc., relate to making the manufacturing field more attractive to the next generation, and let's say in this case especially women in the next generation?
So one of the things I saw one of my clients do, which I thought was fascinating, is they opened up production level jobs to women who had school age children.
Okay.
So imagine a child goes to school from 8 to 3, just for fun, right? We would hire women to come in from 8:30 to 2:30. Okay, so it was a shorter day, and with a half hour lunch, so you got 6 hours a day. Those women had incredible attendance records.
Mm-hmm.
They came in at 8:30. They focused like crazy to 2:30, and then when the 2:30 came, they were done and gone. Okay, but when they were there, and they showed up every day on time, happy and with a smile on their face, right? And in a way, they were more productive than the people that were there 40 hours a week and were not quite as happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then those women started to see other careers. It is amazing what visual context can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a nephew who's going to college for business, but he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He's thinking about accounting, supply chain, purchasing. Um, he's a tall, handsome, strapping young lad. High school state wrestler, wrestles for his college, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, I'm putting on a trade show here where he could meet every possible position in business, and I can make him, tote my totes around, right? So
Yeah.
I don't get all sweaty, and he gets to
Yeah.
meet people,
Yeah.
right?
There you go.
Talk about an opportunity, but for him, it was very eye-opening because when you go to college and you say, okay, it's like this being a mechanical engineer, or this is what supply chain manages. These are the things you should worry about purchasing, your KPIs. That's
Mm-hmm.
so theoretical, but to get him involved in that, to see what he learned,
Mm-hmm.
really sort of fortified my knowledge of the ability to see it.
Yeah.
So if you can do things like job fairs, high school internships. My old company, Jagaman Stamping Company, was great with internships.
Mm-hmm.
They would bring high school kids in, kids going to technical school right up the road, teach them how to be mechanical engineers, treat them really, really well, give them tuition assistance, and that helped. I think the things that the local tech schools do, like having job fairs, having local manufacturers invite them, and having people see how cool manufacturing is, and then relating it to life.
Mm-hmm.
Getting kids, hey, look, I've got a logo set. I've got
Mm-hmm.
a grandson who's 5 who's building logo sets that are age 9 and 10, right? Getting these guys interested in the idea of building and making is one of the keys to success. Encouraging their creativity as children.
Mm-hmm.
Getting them to understand creating relationships and how to get ahead is huge. I think helping women see other successful women in business is also good. I often go into factories where there is only 1 or 2 women in there, and those women are usually the ones I would love to have a beer with
Yeah.
because they can hang.
Yeah.
They're not going to bring in. They're not going to start crying in a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the tough ones, and then all of us girls, when we were younger, who didn't quite fit in,
Mm-hmm.
we realize, oh my gosh, that's why we don't fit in with the high school age clique, because we're not meant for that.
Sure.
We're meant for bigger and better things, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Well, gosh, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was awkward in high school. Like, hey, you know what? This is not your time. Your
Yeah.
time's coming.
Yeah.
It's just not right here. Okay.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, I just captured 5 things that really stuck out in there. Inspiring creativity at a young age, being able to see women in other roles, right? Roles that one could be in one day.
Yeah.
Relationships are big. You talked about job fairs as well. I also really like that flexible work schedule example. Hearing a tangible example like that I imagine not all of our listeners have come across before. Basically, you said like 8:30 to 2:30, right?
Yeah.
So between the hours when I think they do that in Scandinavia a little bit too.
Oh, really?
Right? That
Well,
does
I know
sound
I didn't think of it.
it does sound Scandinavian in a lot of ways, right? Building like a work schedule around your kid's school schedule as well. So I love all the examples you provided there, and really the examples you've been providing for the past 20 minutes as well. So
Good.
we are getting to the end of the conversation, but we have to talk shop a little bit too.
Okay.
Let's talk ERP. We've
Love
talked
it.
about Plexapalooza and Plex a little bit. I think since we do have a number of small manufacturers that listen to this show, one of the first questions I have to ask is, what is one of the biggest misconceptions around ERP implementation in this day and age, right? I do know that there are a number of manufacturers that still think of that's like, oh, that's for the enterprise
The
companies.
biggies, right?
So I've asked too much in this question so far.
That's
I might
okay.
be filling in some of the answer. What would you say is some of the biggest misconceptions around ERP systems today?
Well, first of all, it's not your father's ERP, right? So
Mhm.
people think of ERP and they think of the biggies like SAP and Oracle, which are terrific systems, right? They're customizable, but they're expensive and they're overhead heavy. Plex by Rockwell is configurable, so you don't need an IT staff to run it. In fact, I had one of my best systems admins was a former French Catholic high school French teacher, right? But she understood manufacturing, she understood organization, and she was really, so you don't need an IT nerd to run it, okay? There's logic lovers that run it. Also, the implementation can be as fast as 90 days. So we have customers that run the software as small as $8 million a year, big as $1.3 billion a year. We can implement it in 3 months. No one's going to cry. There's not going to be any broken bones or any blood, and no one's going to die from it, right? It doesn't have to be horrifying. It also doesn't have to be a big CapEx. The nice thing about cloud options or, cloud applications is that it's an expense. It's a recurring regular expense. And you don't have to go to your bank and say, I need, $14 million to put in a new ERP. We also like to, when we implement, our greatest compliment is getting our customers live and saying goodbye, shaking hands and saying, best of luck, call us if you need us. If I do my job well, I don't have to come back. I'll always be there if you need us, but we have a strategy of building Plexperts, right? We want you to be able to run Plex. I would rather have you tell somebody else, oh my gosh, Control+M Solutions is so great. You should call them rather than writing me a check for a couple of $100 every week. I would rather have that goodwill and put that good stuff in the universe and get those customer referrals back. So my message to small manufacturers is, if you're running your company on spreadsheets right now and you're carrying around different color folders for new product introduction, engineering change requests, if you're running your quotes and purchase orders by typing them in Microsoft Word, there's no reason that you have to continue to do that for a very reasonable price. You can have an integrated system that says the minute I put in a customer order, I know what materials I'm going to consume and what I have to buy to replenish that. I know what my capacity is. I know what I need for shipping. It's all in. There's nobody coming from the shipping desk saying, hey, here's my shipping paperwork from today. Now somebody in accounting has to go through page by page and type it in. That doesn't have to happen. You can cut out so much non-value added time. And that's not to say that you should let employees go. What it's to say is, now I can take that AP clerk who was typing all these things in before, give that person more responsibility, get them into better cash management, give them opportunities for growth. Because this person knows my company now, I have a great opportunity to take a resource I know and let them into new options or new opportunities. So that would be my message: is it's not big and it's not scary.
Yeah.
And you can do it.
Yeah, and I feel like this might tie both things we've been talking about together: mentoring as well as helping your clients, in this case, make tough decisions. What are the things you do to help people make tough decisions?
Yeah, that can be the hard thing. So, the one thing that we remember all the time is our clients are successful, so we don't want to break anything. But sometimes we have to tell the client that they have an ugly baby, and that's not easy. I picked up a client a couple of years ago where the two people that were running the company took me out for lunch before we started, and they said, look, we have a problem. We have a deep state here. And by deep state, what I mean is we're all rowing the boat in one direction, but somebody has got maybe a 25 horse motor that's just trying to turn us all the time.
Yeah.
But that person has an in with the president or has the ear of the board.
Sure.
And we need you to help us turn that deep state around. Or we may find a manufacturing process that was maybe required 5 years ago, but no longer is. So when you see those things, what we have to do is somehow shine a light on that cockroach and make it run away without letting the client feel bad about having a cockroach in the kitchen. So it takes a balance of, I don't want to say counseling, but respect. And we have to question ourselves. I can't come into a manufacturer and say, look, you've been making this chili sauce for the last 30 years, and now I'm going to tell you you're doing it wrong. I have a small enough ego that I know I can't do that. Like, I can't come into every factory and say, I know how to do this better, but I can say, look, other people who are successful have tried this. Would it work for you? And then we model it and show it. Say, identify the inputs, identify the required outputs. Can we come up with a configuration that will achieve them both? And if we can, let's try it and let them see the outputs. The other thing I like to do with them is remind them that change is hard. Yeah. So I'm going to take you through one of my favorite little change exercises. It's very, very simple.
Okay.
So I want you to cross your arms. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think I'm trying to tell you?
Well, when I see crossed arms, I feel like it's like closed off, right? I've made up my mind.
Okay. So the first lesson here is I'm trying to teach you something entirely different,
Okay.
which is about change management. I'm not closed off at all to you. So the first thing people think is, oh my gosh, she doesn't want to listen, but it's actually not what we're doing. I want you to look down. My left hand is on my right elbow on
Yep.
top. My right hand is tucked under my left elbow.
Yep.
Now I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to be real easy for me because I do it all the time, but not for you. I want you to switch. So now my left hand is under my right elbow and vice versa, right? Doesn't that feel weird?
It does feel a little. I have switched it up occasionally just for the heck of it, but it is weird. It's
It
not
feels
natural.
weird, doesn't it? If something as common as holding your arms in a different way makes you uncomfortable, what's it going to make your operators feel like when they've been writing everything down for the last 30 years and now they have a computer in front of them?
Mm-hmm.
They feel like this. Okay?
Yeah.
So we have to remember that although we may be in a position where we love change and we love driving dynamic change, not everyone is comfortable with that. I had a gentleman come in to me at Jagaman. His name was Raleigh. He worked there for probably 25, 30 years. And he said, Patty, I'm scared. I've worked here forever. I don't know if I can use a computer. This is a man who ran 4 40-ton presses at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He had parts coming out right and left at him like crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, Raleigh, you are going to be just fine and I will be here. And he became my biggest cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
But had I not done that with him, he could have gotten scared. He might have left the company because he was so nervous about using a computer.
Yeah.
So open your eyes, be aware of change. And when you're looking at solving a difficult client problem or getting them to see where they have an issue, remember yourself how difficult this is for them, right? Think about change for yourself. If someone came in and said, you know, Chris, you really need to change your format for your podcasts. You would at first get a little defensive, right? And then you'd be like, well, wait, why do I have to change? Okay, holy cow, she's got a point. You go through this, you go through this process and it begins with the Tuckman model of the forming, storming, norming, performing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a group that's working well together and introduce a me to it, we're going to go through that process just like you do anytime somebody else comes into your group. And remember that curve. And if you remember that curve's going to happen where, you're right here, some new people come in, some consultants, and you want to look great, you want to look terrific. We come in, we point out a problem, and everyone's bickering. Then pretty soon we build it back up. So that was the storming. Now we're going to get to the norming, and now we're going to get better. If you know you have to go through that process, you recognize it. It makes going through those, whitewater rapids a little bit easier than if you don't consciously attack that and, let everyone know, hey, it's okay to be scared.
Yeah. I think your answer as well as that exercise puts this into perspective really well. I've only got 2 more questions for you, and one of them is a wild card. The first one goes back to something we talked about much earlier, right? You talk about how, when you do good things, they come back around. You talk about how you let your team no-charge clients. What advice do you have for the manufacturing leaders that are out there listening to this episode today on empowering their people? Because I feel like that's a great example, a great thing that you do specific to your business. What advice would you have to the folks listening today?
Remind yourself about why you hired them.
Mm-hmm.
There was a day that person came into your office gung-ho with a great resume, or maybe they were an existing employee that you promoted.
Mm-hmm.
You brought that person in for their knowledge. Trust yourself enough to trust them. Mm-hmm. Because not trusting them means you don't trust your decision in having hired them. So it's really a reflection on you. So empower those folks. And if you're having a hard time letting go of control, which candidly sometimes I do, we all do, I have to remind myself, oh yeah, you know what? This guy is the expert in this field, right? Also create an environment of teamwork. So at Control+M, I always tell people no one person can know everything about Plex, right? Just like no one person can run an entire manufacturing company. I'm great at certain things. I'm not particularly great at the quality modules. I don't know how to set up inspection modes or control plan. That's not me. So I'll tell my customers flat out, look, I might be your project manager, but I'm going to bring in a subject matter expert to do those things. And then I trust that person to do the job because that's why I hired them. that would be my advice. And the other thing I would tell folks too is if your boss is empowering you, it's okay to ask for help or for guidance. It's okay to have a checkpoint. No, I've been handed this project because my boss trusts me. Say, hey, can we have periodic checkpoints? I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track. Start small, get bigger.
Yeah. No, it all ties in. I like that last point about having those checkpoints, reminding the folks out there that it's still okay to ask for help. You've provided great stories, advice, examples across this full conversation. The only other question I have left is kind of the manufacturing happy hour wrap-up question. Is there anything you wish I would have asked you that I haven't yet? I mean, I know you're also very well versed in operational excellence and change management. There are a lot of different ways we could have gone with today's conversation, but is there any one outstanding item that you still have on your mind?
I do love to talk about operational excellence, and in our world, we call it operational plexcellence because we only deal with folks who
that's a
use
solid
plex.
play on words.
Thank you. It's one of our favorite things to do. The reason I like to talk about it is really about visibility. So the idea of operational excellence is you're going to take an objective look at your operation. You're going to stabilize, then you're going to improve, then you're going to sustain, right? It is funny what you don't see. Okay? And this can be true in your home. It can be true in your life. It can be true in manufacturing. But we do sometimes go into factories. We'll take a Gemba walk and we'll see, here's a machine and around the corner and underneath some heavy shelving or stepping over some roadblocks is the computer that they've got to report production on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this guy's been doing this for so long and his supervisor has seen it for so long. They don't see that every time this guy does something, he has to walk over to this computer 15 feet away and plug it in and come back. Just moving that computer would make that man's life easier.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a policy to wear safety glasses, how often do you look around the floor to see who's wearing their safety glasses? And are the leaders wearing their safety glasses? Is the president wearing the safety glasses? Are you setting an example?
Mm-hmm.
Are your KPIs correct?
Mm-hmm.
I once worked with a company that was a steel processor. And when you take a coil of steel and you cut it into pieces, there's a metric called tons per shift hour. That's very important because how many tons you produce is important. Once that steel is in a sheet and you're going to maybe laser burn it, you can't really measure tons per shift hours as an effective measurement because if you took a sheet, let's just make the math simple, you took a 1-ton sheet of steel and you cut one piece off of it and you put it back on the shelf, you will have credit for handling a ton of steel.
Mm-hmm.
Now you pick it up off the shelf, put it back, and cut another circle on it. Guess what? You just got credit for 900 pounds of steel. Okay? So now, yay, if I'm measuring tons per shift hours, I've got 1.9 in the last hour.
Yeah.
But common sense tells you putting that up there once and cutting out Turk circles is a lot better. So I put in Plex for a customer once, and oh my gosh, their materialization went sky high. Their labor costs went down. Their efficiency went up. Everything was great, but they were getting called on the carpet by corporate. And they said, you have to come down and figure out, and I had to tell these folks who've been running this business for 50 years, you're measuring the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've condensed about a 2-week activity in about a 30-second story, but having to sit them down and say to measure your different factories with the same metric is not going to get you successful. You care about different things, but because you grew into this organically, you didn't think about what the KPI should be. These people are selling in pieces. These people are selling in tons, right? A fab shop is different than a toll processing shop. So sometimes coming in to do this, there are things that really smart people can't see because you get used to looking past them.
Yeah.
And so that's one of our passions.
Yeah. Breaking, it's not breaking habit, but it kind of is, right? Like just looking at something with a fresh set of eyes. It's almost like we talk about getting the next generation involved. That's usually one of the first things the new person recognizes. It's like, why in the world is that guy walking from one end to the other to do this task? Let's just move the computer. And literally 10 people that might have been working at the company for 10 years each are just like, yeah, it's a really good idea. I can't believe none of us have ever thought of that before.
And it translates into your home, right?
Yeah.
So my husband will periodically say, okay, time to 5S the kitchen. Why do you have your air fryer here when you use it about once a month?
Yeah.
Why is it taking up valuable counter space? Get rid of it. I used to think the idea of 5S was drawing shapes on your desk to make sure that my coaster went into the right place. But
Mm-hmm.
in reality, if you think about it, it's really all about efficiency. It's not about control. It's not about, and it's not a fad, right? It's real, and there's a reason for it. So I think I think for me, the opportunity that I get to spend my life going to people's factories, seeing
Mm-hmm.
things made, helping companies make more money, and keeping manufacturing in the United States going is probably the greatest blessing that a woman could ever have in her career. Well, anyone could ever have in their career for that matter.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly had a fascinating career. I appreciate you sharing an hour's worth of great advice from it.
Well,
Patti,
thank
thank
you.
you so much for jumping on Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Cheers.
Cheers.